Hello, everybody, and welcome to Jack's Corner. I'm Tarzan Bonanno, and with me, as always, is our founder, Jack Figgle. We have just completed the Papal Audience section of Jack's life, so we're going to take a break from audiences of famous people. Those are his words, not mine. And talk about the books that have been published within the last year. Jack knows where he's going to start. So, Jack, how are you doing?
Good, Tarzan. Good morning and glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to him forever.
I'm doing well. I thought I'd take a little break from talking about trips and meeting people. We'll get back to that next week when I start telling stories of meeting Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew uh, many times over the last 30 years that I've known him. But this week I thought we'd take a break for our new listeners and listeners that aren't aware that I wear another hat, which is publisher of Eastern Christian Publications, which actually in 2023, last year, celebrated our 30th anniversary of being in business.
Mm. Oh, congratulations.
So in 30 years, I think we've published at least 200, maybe even 300 books, all on our website, ecpubs.com. And the books I'm going to talk about today are all available on there on the tab that says new titles. So they're all consolidated together for our most recent books. But before I get into the books, just to let people know and to use it as a marker in time, next week, Wednesday, there will be the annual Ecumenism Award given by the Washington Theological Consortium in DC, which is a group of about a dozen seminaries and theological schools in the Washington metropolitan area that have joint events. Students can cross-register and take courses at each other's institutions, use each other's libraries, and one of the members of that consortium is our own Byzantine Catholic Seminary in Pittsburgh. They are a member by virtue of being a satellite member with their online master's in theology program. And so students and seminarians in Pittsburgh can take courses that are online from any of the Washington schools, and Washington seminaries and theological schools can take courses that are online at the seminary. That's now been in existence, I think, 3 or 4 years. Anyway, that consortium gives an annual ecumenical award. And for, I think, 15 years now, I've sponsored that event. And so in recognition, they've named it the Figgle Lecture, which feels kind of nice when you say it like that, or the Figgle Address. And so it's going to be next Wednesday. It may or may not be live stream. The website says if you want a remote access, register, and I guess if they get enough people to register for remote viewing, they'll set it up. And it's going to be a Reverend Dr. Larry Miller, who's going to be talking on the theme of we see Christ in, or can we see Christ in one another and one another in Christ? Dr. Miller is the former secretary of the Global Christian Forum, general secretary of the Mennonite World Conference, and a bunch of ecumenical groups. I believe he's a Mennonite minister. And so he brings a very, very different perspective than what we Catholics or Byzantine Catholics are used to. So I'm kind of looking forward to his address. It's going to be held for those that are in the DC area at Wesley Theological School on Massachusetts Avenue. And it starts at 6 o'clock with an ecumenical prayer service by the students of the consortium, followed by the presentation of the award, his address with the Q&A session, and then we have a little reception afterwards for those that are local. So that's going to be next Wednesday. And 1 year ago, that event was Father Deacon John Chrysavas, who is a personal advisor to Patriarch Bartholomew in the Greek Orthodox Church, and he specializes in ecology issues as well as ecumenism. And he received the Figel, he did the Figel lecture and received the Ecumenism Award last February. And his lecture was so well received that we asked him if he would let me publish it as a little monograph.
Real quick, you mentioned, you said next Wednesday. Do you mean this Wednesday, the 21st of February, or
sorry.
next Wednesday, the 28th?
Yeah, this coming Wednesday, the 21st. Yeah.
Okay.
I got confused. Yeah, it's 2 days from today, the 21st. Yep. Yeah. So back to Father John. So he's an advisor to Patriarch Bartholomew, has been for 20 plus years. He lives in Maine, but works for the Ecumenical Patriarch. Does a lot of traveling to Istanbul almost every couple of months, I think. And I've known him 20 years, and he came down and gave the lecture, and it was so well received that we asked if we could publish a book. He also gave me a couple of other essays that he had written to fill out the book. So there were 3 essays in the book altogether. The book is entitled Theology, Ecology, and Ecumenism, Reflections of an Innocent Sojourner. And so it's by Deacon John. And the other exciting thing about Deacon John is that last summer, he was named as the first executive director of a brand new ecumenical organization called the Huffington Ecumenical Institute of Boston, Boston College and Helena College up in Boston. And it's the Greek Orthodox hosted and sponsored organization to promote ecumenism. First time something like that's been created that I know of. And Deacon John is the first executive director. And the Institute has agreed to be one of the co-sponsors of our Oriental Lumen Conference this coming June. So we're going to be collaborating with them, perhaps even more so in the future, but for this year, they've agreed to be a co-sponsor with us. So that was the first book that we published a year ago. The one that followed that kind of went in the opposite direction, in that it was oriented towards Roman Catholics as well as Byzantine Catholics, that it was a book on the Rosary. A Ukrainian Catholic layman named Kenneth Krush put together a reflection using Eastern prayers to go with the mysteries of the Rosary. So it's called The Rosary, a Litany of Faith. And it's also available on our website under the new tab. And it's a small little, almost pocket-sized book that's perfect for praying the Rosary and reflecting on various prayers associated with each of the mysteries. Even though we don't, oh, there you go. That's the one. You got it there yourself. And what do you think?
For the listeners, I'm holding up the copy I purchased. Sorry, only he can see me.
Yeah. So what did you think of it?
I enjoy it. I actually, the fathers of Marian fathers, I'm part of their confraternity of praying 15 decades of the Rosary. And so I'll take this out and I'll do it the Eastern way.
Very good.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
Well, I remember growing up as a boy when I was an altar server at Saints Peter and Paul Church in Duquesne, Pennsylvania, coming in for the back in those days we had two liturgies, 8:30 in English for the young people and 10:30 in Church Salonik for the older folks. And sometimes they were referred to as low mass and high mass. And when I would come in, especially for when I come in for the second liturgy at 10:30, at 10 o'clock, the ladies of the church who belonged to what was called the Rosary Society came in and started praying the Rosary in Slavonic. And I remember them chanting it, Our Father and Hail Mary, almost like an incantation in a monastery. And it filled the church with these sounds. And as I went about my business of getting ready for liturgy, I would hear these in the background, and it really got me into a really good spiritual mood for the liturgy. So I remember the Rosary, even though I didn't understand all the words. I remember hearing it over and over and over again.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about this book, the way the reflections are. Hail Mary, full of. This is for the first joyful mystery, the Annunciation. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus, eternal Word of God. After Jesus, there is the thought, the little meditation on each thing before the second half of the Hail Mary. I absolutely love that.
Good. I'll tell Ken how much you enjoy it. Following that, later in the spring of last year, we published, after a year's worth of work, the proceedings or the papers from the previous year's Oriental Lumen Conference that was about a common date for Easter between Catholics and Orthodox, and that was our theme. And Father Joseph Loya from Villanova University, one of our regular Oriental Lumen attendees, I think he's been to almost every single one since we started 28 years ago. He came to me and said, Jack, those papers are so good, you really, really need to publish them as a book, as a proceedings book. So I said, well, fine. And he said, I'd like to offer my assistance as my sabbatical in the fall semester to compile those papers, transcribe the Q&A discussion, and get it prepared for publication if you'd be willing to publish it. And I said, absolutely. So Father Joe worked then last spring and then into the summer. And last summer we published, the book is titled Easter Together, an Ecumenical Exploration for a Common Date. And they are as I said, the papers and the panel discussions from Oriental Lumen 26, which was held in 2022, so almost 2 years ago. It was a virtual conference, so we didn't actually meet face to face. We were all online. And I think we had 4 panel discussions, and the papers and videos of all the papers were available for people to watch ahead of time. And the conference itself was just the speakers getting together as a panel, and we had people viewing from around the world the online conference. The book has been well received, and people are kind of excited. I'm hopeful that it might be the basis for some agreement. We keep hearing rumors that there's a discussion going on between Rome and Orthodoxy about doing something for the anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, which is going to occur in 2025, next year, so 325 to 2025. And the Council of Nicaea, the first one, was when the date of Easter was first agreed
to be held. Hearing about this for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yep. Well, what's interesting is that in 2025, just coincidentally, according to the current calendars, Easter is simultaneous on the same day between Catholics and Orthodox. And then after 2025, I don't think it occurs for another 5 or 6 years. And so my hope, and I think a lot of other people's hope, is some agreement can be reached even on this small issue to, after 2025, make it be one from then on. The problem, of course, right now is that there's no dialogue occurring between the Russian Orthodox Church, which is the largest Orthodox church, and the West because of the war in Ukraine. And there's a bit of a schism between Moscow and Constantinople over Constantinople recognizing the Autocephalous Church in Kiev of Ukrainian Orthodox. And so if there was an agreement, I don't think the Russians would be participating, which would be a shame, of course. But I think there's a lot of the Orthodox I talk to say, our calculations are the same. The formulas are the same. It's just that the Orthodox start with a different set of tables of what date is the equinox. And God rest his soul and may his memory be eternal. But Metropolitan Callistos told me 20 years ago over dinner one night that you can go outside on March the 22nd, and you can measure and see that the sun is up half the day and it's night half the day. If you go out 13 days later, when the Orthodox start their calculations, the sun is not up half the day, it's up longer. And so the celestial heavens dictate when the equinox occurs, not man. And so he agreed that things needed to change because every couple hundred years, the dates get further and further apart. And in fact, I think this year, because the Orthodox Easter misses the next lunar cycle and Catholic Easter is super early, March 31st, and the Orthodox Easter is super late, I think May 5th or something.
And that's this week.
That's this year. Yeah. They're 5 weeks apart. The first Sunday of May is the Orthodox Easter. And
which calendar are you guys using? Sorry, because I'm Latin, remember?
On the Julian calendar, because they missed a lunar cycle, it's May 5th is Orthodox Easter and March 31st is Catholic Easter. Or the Gregorian Easter is March 31st and the Julian Easter is May 5th. And in the Eastern Church, both Catholics and Orthodox, there is a fasting period that occurs between the Sunday after Easter, which is called All Saints in the Byzantine calendar, and the day after All Saints, so that it's the 8 days after Easter, we start what's called, not after Easter, the Sunday after Pentecost. And that's called All Saints. And the Monday after All Saints, we start what's called the Apostles' Fast, which goes until June 29th, the feast of Saints Peter and Paul. Well, that's a fixed date. And the Orthodox, who follow what they call the new calendar, use the Gregorian dates for the fixed feast, but the Julian dates for Pascha and all the things related to Pascha. Well, since their Pascha is so late, when you get to Pentecost sometime in June, and then you get to All Saints a week later, their Apostles' Fast shrinks to almost nothing. Whereas the Catholic one for us Byzantines is almost as long as Lent. It's a good 5 to 6 weeks long. And that's one of the fasting periods that Callistos talks about in his lecture on sacred time, that we have to fast before we can feast. And so there's actually 4 fasting periods in the year for us besides Lent. There's this Apostles' Fast. There's a fast before Christmas called Philip's Fast. And then there's a Dormition Fast, which is 2 weeks before the Feast of the Dormition, or in the Western calendar, the Assumption in mid-August. So in the mixed calendar of Gregorian and Julian, the Apostles' Fast shrinks to almost nothing. And at some point in the future, it's going to disappear in some years when the Orthodox or the Julian Easter is so late that June 29th occurs before the fast even starts.
The beauty of calendars. I'm excited to get mine because you said you told me yesterday I'm finally getting one. So is that? But that's hysterical.
Yeah, that was the book from last summer, and it's got some very detailed talks in it. One of the speakers, Deacon Tony Kotler from Maryland, is an engineer by training, and so he goes into great depths of explaining all of the calendars and all the calculations and everything. And then on the other hand, we had Archbishop Metropolitan Job, who is the Orthodox co-chair of the International Dialogue, and he gave a talk about his views on this subject. And he was a great proponent of having one calculation, one Easter after next year. And I'm hopeful that since he's essentially the highest level ecumenical representative of the Orthodox churches, being with the ecumenical patriarch in Turkey and the co-chair, that his opinion will perhaps influence a lot of people. And I think last year, this actually got some international press when both the Pope Francis, and Patriarch Bartholomew made public statements about finding a way to have a common Easter going forward. That as a witness to the world, the least we Christians can do is agree on the date when we celebrate the resurrection of our Lord. And so I think there's quite a bit of interest and support for this idea. It's just a question of how to deal with those in the Orthodox Church that think their dates are sacrosanct and that they are tradition and you can't change tradition. And in fact, there is no change to tradition. It's just a matter of using the more accurate ecclesial calculations of when is the equinox. Because the Council of Nicaea said it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox. And because the lunar cycle doesn't follow, our 12 monthly periods, it works on a different kind of a schedule. That full moon can occur any day of the month. And so that's where the two calendars clash. And I hope and pray that something is agreed. And I'll also just throw in a real quick plug for people to watch this space for more details. I'm in the early planning stages of a pilgrimage to Nicaea in July of 2025, next year, and also to visit the 7 churches of Revelation as part of the trip, and make a visit to Istanbul and a few days in Rome, and hopefully get private audiences with the Pope and Patriarch. It'll be about a 2-week trip scheduled by the Oriental Illumined Foundation for July of 2025. So watch this space for more details. Okay, back to our books. Late last summer, I published a book about Bishop Peter Paul Oros, who is a martyred bishop who was ordained secretly in the underground church of Transcarpathia in the middle of the 20th century. And a gentleman named Louis Puskás Laszlo Puskás wrote his biography. So it's called Peter Paul Oros, His Life and Martyrdom. and it was edited by Victor Bohiv in Transcarpathia into English for us, and we published it last summer, and so it's also one of our new books in the last year. We have 3 books that are all sort of tied together in that they are Church Slavonic historical publications that were published in the early 20th century. One is called Hladite Hospoda, which is known as a large collection of prayers of Veliki Zbornik. It was published in 1937 in Prešov, and it's a very thick book, about 900 pages or so in Church Slavonic, and it's essentially all the prayers of the church that you need to do the daily office and liturgies throughout the year. And we're undertaking to collect and translate those that have not yet been translated, the text of that book, and publish an English version of this Izbornik. But a friend of mine found a case of them in his church rectory once last year and offered them for me to sell. So they are on our website. Also with it is a Mali Izbornik, which means a small one, small collection of prayers. It was compiled by a priest named Nikolai Choma, published in Uzhhorod in 1924. And that actually is the same book that my grandmother used as her personal prayer book in the 20th century that my father handed down to me. And now I have in my private library. And she has her name in it, her home address in Duquesne, where she lived, where my dad was born. And I'm guessing that she bought it in the early to middle 1920s. It's interesting in that it uses Latin characters for the Church Slavonic rather than Cyrillic, and was published in Uzhhorod. Today in Uzhhorod, they use Cyrillic characters for everything because of their influence from being under Russia for so long. But this book was done in the Latin characters, and it's a sort of a small collection of personal prayers and liturgy. And again, I have the hopes to compile the text to publish an English equivalent of it, because even the Church Slavonic has been quite popular since we announced it last summer. Then the third of those books is called Greco-Katolitsky Duchovny Pisny, which is a Greek Catholic Slavonic hymnal. Was published in Prešov, compiled by Stefan Pop, and it's got Church Slavonic hymns, 200 pages worth, with music. And so for anyone who's a cantor or part of a choir or just likes to sing, I think this has more than twice as many hymns as what we've translated to English. And so half of this book, I've never heard of the songs or seen them before. And so it's a historic book that was done in Prešov, I think in the 60s, by when it was sort of half communism, half Western. And it was published by the Bishop of Prešov, and is again a historic book. So all 3 of those kind of came out together, and we announced them last fall. Coming a little forward in time, in I believe it was around September, a Ukrainian Catholic deacon, Father Deacon Christopher Todd, came to me and said that he had written I think it's his master's thesis, titled "Reclaiming Our Inheritance After Vatican II: Leadership Lessons from Eastern Catholic History and Liturgy." And the title is pretty descriptive. It's a small monograph, I think 100 and some pages, that he wrote for his master's. I think it was an MAT online master's from the seminary. Dr. Meinrad at the seminary was his advisor, who wrote the foreword. And so it talks about the history of the Eastern Catholic churches in liturgy and history since Vatican II. So it's all about trying to reestablish and reconnect to our Eastern roots. It's also been quite popular, and Father Deacon Christopher has been around giving lectures and things in various places. I saw he was just in Front Royal, Virginia, I think last week, talking about this topic at the Ukrainian Catholic Parish in Front Royal, west of here. The next book was I think the 8th or 9th book I published by Marianne Salas, who was a Ukrainian Catholic lady up in northeastern Pennsylvania. She lives near Wilkes-Barre, and she's done a whole series of books of daily reflections, and 3 of them are for an entire year. So it's a daily reflection for each day, and it's a short 1 page. And the idea is that you can sit with your cup of coffee, and in the time you drink your coffee, you can read this 1 page of religious, spiritual reflections. And she came up with kind of cute titles. The first one was called Java with Jesus. I think the second one was Cappuccino with Christ. And the third one was Latte with the Lord. And they came out a couple of years apart over the last 10 years. Well, she's written a new one now that's all about forgiveness. And the title of that one is, again, kind of cute, get your attention. It's titled Knock That Boulder Off Your Shoulder. And I love the cover image. It was a painting that she had done where you see a little stick figure trying to push over this big, huge boulder on the cover. It's kind of neat. And Tarzan, you're about to show me all of the copies you have.
No, I was just pulling out the Java, cappuccino, and latte as you were saying them.
Yep.
That's all that was happening over here.
Okay. They're in addition to this, so this is her most recent reflections. She's working, I think she said, on another one. I forget the title, but she's also published other similar books. Tea with the Theotokos, all about Mary. Unfinished Business is her Lenten reflections. Paschal Ponderings is her book for after Easter until Pentecost. And there's one more, Carrying Your Cross with Christ is all about caregiving and people who are ill and helping them get through Lent as well with daily reflections. So it's for caregivers and those who are receiving care. So she's a lay woman chaplain at various nursing facilities and hospitals in Northeast Pennsylvania. And she writes very, very interesting and spiritual reflections. And this is her latest contribution to that collection. Besides being on the new page of our website, all of her publications have a page in and of themselves. And so in the categories list on our website, there's her name as an author. We also have a similar page for Father Jack Custer and all of his publications, and one for Father Robert Slazinski and the 12 or 13 books by him that I've published. So those 3 authors have published multiple books that I have on their own pages. All right. Later on in the fall, maybe October, we finally finished an English translation of a biography of Bishop Paul Goydich of Prešov. He was the bishop who published that hymnal, the book of Slavonic hymns that I mentioned earlier. He was the bishop of Prešov in the middle 20th century, was martyred, and Father Peter Sturak, who is at the seminary in Prešov, wrote his biography in Slovak, and a priest up in New Jersey, Father Martin Vavrick, translated to English that we then published in the fall. So it's a biography of Bishop Goydich, who was bishop from 1926 to 1960. As I said, the middle of the 20th century in Prešov. And the back of the book is very interesting. It has some pictures of Bishop Goydich during his life. He was a very popular bishop, so he's got lots of pictures with visiting faithful and with priests. And then there are pictures of his not canonization, but being proclaimed a blessed. I think by I think it was Pope Francis about 7-8 years ago. And a friend of mine, Dr. Tom Christenitz from my parish, was related to Bishop Goydich, and so was there for when he was proclaimed a blessed. And so there's pictures from Rome from that event when it took place in the back of the book. So it's a very detailed account of scenes and events from Bishop Goydich's life. Again, very interesting reading for those who want to find out more about the martyrs of the Eastern Catholic Church, the Ruthenian Catholic Church from Europe, both in Slovakia and Bishop Oros, Peter Oros from Transcarpathia. Then, as some of your listeners may know, last summer I led a pilgrimage to Constantinople or Istanbul, and then to the Holy Land in July. We called Light of the East #4, so it's the fourth ecumenical trip that I've led in the last 10 years. And we used Viking Travel for all of our travel arrangements, so it was very, very well planned with high quality hotels and tour guides. It was really, really great trip. And on the trip that we announced to the public, only half of the people that sign up for it do I know. The other half are all strangers that I meet the day we leave from Dulles Airport to fly to Constantinople, our first stop. And so one of the groups was actually a family, and we had a couple of married couples as well, and we had a father-son who were Orthodox, and the father was a priest. But we had this family sign up from Brooklyn. And it was the father and the mother and 2 teenage children. And I thought, well, this will be great. We'll have a very wide range of ages in our group. And they attend, I believe, our parish in Manhattan, or they may go to the cathedral in Passaic. But anyway, they signed up for the trip, and I never met them, didn't know anything about them. And when I arrived at the meeting point for gathering everyone to get on the plane at Dulles Airport, I met them for the first time. The mother and father, Chiara, and the father's name escapes me, Polvani, and their children, Benedict and Grace, were there. And it was wonderful to see such a group as a family, because the 2 children had a genetic defect that caused them to have a little bit of a handicap. And it was their physical appearance, but their mental capacity was amazing. So we went on this trip, and through the course of the 2 weeks we spent together, it was a small group, just 20 people. We got to know each other very, very well. We prayed together, we socialized together, everyone got along. And I attribute that to the Holy Spirit, because I don't control who comes. And I just hope that everybody gets along, because we're going to be, traveling together for quite a period of time. And the last farewell dinner before we flew home, everyone came to me and said that Grace, the daughter, who had turned 17 the day we left the US on the trip, was starting college, and her first college assignment from an English class she already knew was to write a book. And so everyone suggested, and I talked to the parents, that Grace should write a book about our trip from the perspective of a teenager. And so she was taking notes, and from what I understand, keeping a bit of a diary. So we asked her if she would make her school project into a book that I would publish. And sure enough, she did. So it's called That They May All Be One. She adopted the title from Ut Unum Sint, the title of the ecumenical document of 1995, that comes from the Gospel of John at the Last Supper, about church unity and the direction and exhortation, if you will, of Christ to his followers to be one church. And she wrote this marvelous story, or series of stories, and lots of pictures. And so I was able to get it published just in time for Christmas. It turned out to be 290 pages with, I think, over 200 pictures. So it's almost like a photo album with stories. And I was able to get one of our pilgrims, Bishop John Michael Botine, to write the foreword. He was on the trip with us, and he wrote, I think, some of the most interesting comments about the trip, that he didn't know for sure that he was on the same trip, because the author had identified so many details. I think I've told this story already before, right?
Yep, I was about to grab the episode number by scrolling all the way back to when we did this.
So I won't go into too much detail or read. I'm remembering now that I read from the forward, because it's so I won't do that again. But we covered this in a previous episode. So anyway, that was
episode 11 in December of 2023, on December 11th.
Okay, so that was a book we published in December. Since then, I've published another rosary book by a Roman Catholic author who's local here to Virginia, called One Mother, One Family. It's a scriptural meditation on the rosary with worldwide sacred art. So again, it's a picture book with reflections on all the mysteries of the rosary. The author is Monica Amparo, and we just launched it here in the Washington area over the last few weeks. So it's relatively new and an exciting book. We're getting interest from some Roman Catholic bookstores, and we had a launch at the St. John Paul Shrine last Wednesday at a celebration called Mary of China, in honor of the Chinese New Year. So they had an event that I had a book display, and we sold a bunch of copies there last Saturday. And then the last one I'll just mention on my way to finish up is the first volume of the collection of my autobiography. Over the last year or two, I decided I wanted to leave a bit of a legacy of the history of my life and the things I've done. And when I sat down to do it, I couldn't figure out how to get it into one book. So it's going to be 10 books altogether. And the first one that is done and available on the website is called Boyhood, which is my life from when I was born until I graduated from college. Volume 2 is my professional career and what I did for my day job for 40 years. Then there's going to be a book all about books, all about my publishing career and all the things I've done with regard to publications and our smartphone app and email prayer services. Volumes 4 and 5 are going to be all about Oriental Illumina, the history of the 28 conferences in the US, plus the conferences overseas and elsewhere. Volume 6 will be what we've heard the last few episodes, stories of my audiences with the Pope, the last 3 popes, as well as what we'll be talking about next week, which is audiences with Patriarch Bartholomew. Then I've led a number of pilgrimages, both to the Holy Land and Rome and Istanbul, but also to Eastern Europe. So there'll be a book of pilgrimages. My sisters wanted me to write about my family background and our traditions. So I'm going to write a book called Family Heritage, which will go into how we grew up as Eastern Catholics and the relatives that I found in my family tree in Europe and the research I've done. And then a friend of mine suggested that all of the collections I have in my house would make an interesting picture book. So volume 9 is going to be just called Collections. I have a collection of swords, a collection of Star Trek ships, a collection of carpeting, a collection of signed books, lots of collections. And one of those collections is over 100 scorecards from golf courses that I played when I was a younger man. And so volume 10 is going to be scanned images of those scorecards with a little story about every course that I played, with a story about a particular shot or a vantage point or how we got to the course or what the circumstances were for going there. And those courses are, I think, in about, 20 different countries, some 40 different states across America, and every continent except Antarctica. And so that's going to be volume number 10. And those 10 books are going to come out, I hope, over the next year or two, in between all the other work we have coming down the line. So that wraps it up for books of the last year.
Awesome. Well, looks like everybody listening has a lot of stuff to go purchase. Well, I guess if it's Lent, maybe you should wait. But go purchase everything. Anyways, so as Jack just said, next week we will be talking about the audiences with Patriarch Bartholomew. And then we'll go on from there. So, thank you all for coming to this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing, Jack. And see y'all later. Goodbye, and God bless.